Okay, welcome everyone to this webinar, and thank you for attending. So this webinar is Solutions for On-Farm Organics, Digging into Compost, and it's the second in a series related to waste management, with the first webinar being on plastic waste. That webinar is also available as a recording for people who want to go back to have a look at that webinar. So my name's Anne-Marie Boland. We are bringing this webinar to you from the Soil Wealth Integrated Crop Protection Team. It's a levy-funded project through the vegetable industry with co-contribution from Australian Government through Hort Innovation. We've got a few speakers today. First of all, myself, I'll be talking about some of the background to the work that we've done in this waste area. John McCure from AORA, and also a guest grower, Mark Schruers from Peter Schruers and Sons. So I just wanted to acknowledge the country on which we all meet today. I'm on Wurundjeri country in Melbourne, and I wanted to pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Just a few housekeeping issues. We have opportunity for people to ask questions through the chat function. So as we're going, we have Clinton Muller from the RMCG team who'll be monitoring that chat and also ensuring that we can get to your questions. At the end, we will have a panel session, which Clinton will be facilitating as well. But first of all, with the agenda, I'll be presenting a bit of a summary of the organics world for the vegetable industry, and also how it fits into the waste hierarchy, the sort of resources that we're looking at when we're talking about organic material, and also making sure that people understand that it's not just one product that we're thinking about. It's a range of different products that we're looking to either manage or reduce when we're looking at organic material. Also important to note that a lot of organic material is used beneficially, so it's not necessarily a problem. It can very much be a fantastic resource. We have the commercial composter view from AORA. So John McHugh is the CEO of AORA, and he'll be presenting the view of composters. And also it's really an opportunity for us to have a discussion around our experiences, making sure that composters understand what growers need, and also growers understand what the composter, what sort of process they're going through. And as I said, at the end, we'll have a bit of a panel and Q&A, which Clinton will be facilitating. So first of all, why organics? I think, as I mentioned, that there are some organic materials that are seen as a waste, but we also need to think of organics as a resource. We know that with rising input costs and efficiency issues, that organics can provide a solution for some of the soil health issues that we're trying to address. We also want to make sure that we're reducing the amount of waste that we dispose of, and with fresh food, there's been some numbers thrown around about a third of food that doesn't actually get consumed. So that's a very important issue to try and reduce. And also there's a lot of interest lately in increasing circularity and trying to make the best use of our resources. And if we make the best use of our resources, we're also making financial and profitability improvements as well. So we've done a lot of work over the last 10 years or more, I guess, particularly with the Soil Wealth ICP project around looking at the waste hierarchy. As I mentioned, we've also looked at plastics and workshop waste, but for this process, we're talking about organic waste. And the goal that we come back to for industry is to move up the waste hierarchy. If we can avoid the production of waste, that's ideal. If we can reduce it or reuse waste, that's even better. sorry, that's also good, but recycling is also an opportunity that we can work towards. Where we don't want to be is down the bottom of that hierarchy around disposing of waste. We want to see the value that is in these materials and actually use it to its highest value. Also, a lot of talk recently around the circular economy, and we know that there is a large volume of organic material that's produced on farm. A large amount of this is non-food organic material, and it can be incorporated back into the soil. And it can contribute really well to soil health. And we're going to hear from Mark about how he makes sure that he's getting the best out of his soil with some of this organic material. I think farming is a fantastic example of how we ensure that the circular economy is at work. We're really always thinking about how we can ensure that cover cropping, crop residues are managed to go back into the soil and to build organic matter. I guess the thing with organic waste is that we also have significant volumes of product loss or food loss. And some of the work that we've done has shown that this can be up to 500,000 tonnes nationally for the vegetable industry. And this is material that's not making it to the consumer through the supply chain. And so I think we've got two main areas of organic material in the vegetable industry. We've got this organic green material, which can be beneficially used. And then we've also got this product loss or food loss side of things. This component needs to be more actively managed. Sorry, go back, Clinton. And we see a lot of innovation associated with reducing waste generated in that product loss side of things, and also reusing and recycling. I just wanted to mention a lot of the work that we've done around some of the quantifying how much waste is being produced is available at the Farm Waste portal, farmwaste.com.au. And we also have a dashboard there which provides some of the information that I've just mentioned. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that Farm Waste portal. Next slide. I'll briefly provide some examples of how we are managing organic materials before we jump into the use of compost on farm and look at some of the innovation that's being undertaken at the moment. Firstly, you may not be aware, but there's a very large project that's recently started with End Food Waste Australia and Hort Innovation to reduce food waste on farm. And this is really looking at product specification and value adding for out-of-spec products. And the team at End Food Waste Australia are really keen to hear back from growers and industry about some of their issues. So we've got a QR code there that people can provide their views on the out-of-spec products that are resulting in large amounts of food loss. So some other examples that I'd like to mention are around some of moving up as I said, being up the high end of the hierarchy is food rescue. And so I'm sure a lot of people are aware of the different food rescue organisations, including Foodbank, OzHarvest and Second Bite. And that's a great way to ensure that out-of-spec product can be reused. The other one is animal feed, and we have examples where animal products, where food waste is distributed to cattle for feed, and that's a good, I guess, outcome of ensuring that it's not wasted. We also have some examples of very exciting changes where we're using some of the waste material for bioenergy. And this is a particularly innovative solution that CalFresh have put in place in partnership with the Queensland Government, and it's establishing a scenic rim agricultural industrial precinct. It's using green material or residues, but it's also using some of the product loss or food waste material to produce energy. And it's a massive development and one that's very much worthwhile having a look at. We also have some value-added product, such as NutriV, which is a company of Fresh Select, and it's a really innovative approach to producing vegetable powders out of food waste. So now I wanted to get into the compost side of things. We are aware of some of the benefits of compost, and John will talk to that a bit more in a minute. And from a growing point of view, it's very much about the soil health of your soil, improving water hold capacity, carbon. But I guess it's really important that we need fit for purpose products for the vegetable industry, and that's very much a part of this conversation, is making sure that what is used in the vegetable industry is really fit for the production of vegetables. Some of the key questions that you might want to think about for what you want from your compost, and also just thinking about for this session, is what feedstocks are used. Is the product mature? Has it been tested? We're going to hear a bit more about certification to AS4454. How does it fit with my farming system? And does it contain any nutrients? And do you want it to contain any nutrients? It may be that you're not seeing it to have any nutritional value. It's more about the carbon value. So I think I might hand it over now to John McHugh from Aora. So John.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this webinar today. And I'll start with just a little bit of an explanation about Aora, the Australian Organics Recycling Association. You can see by the name of our association why we call it Aora. It's a bit easier to handle. We are the national peak industry body for the Australian organics recycling industry. Our vision is to recycling and reuse of organic materials within a circular economy is widely and understood and supported by Australians. And I often say that when we talk about the circular economy, with half of our waste stream in this country predominantly made up of organics, if we can't get organics right, and there's no reason why we can't get organic recycling right, we will always struggle to have a circular economy. Our mission is to work with all the stakeholders to facilitate an operating environment which maximises the recycling and the reuse of organic material. We don't want that going into landfill, and promote the benefits of compost, soil conditioners and mulches across the Australian community and business. So that's the broad objectives of Aora. So compost, what is it? It's not new. It's not particularly, well, it is special, but it's, compost is a natural product from our environment. If we think about the forest floor, it's been happening for a long time, as long as we've had organic material. But composting is the aerobic or oxygen requiring decomposition of organic matter by microorganisms under controlled conditions. And as I said, forest floor has been doing it for a lot longer than probably we have. But today, composting is an industrialised process for commercial, economic, environmental, government, and for social reasons. Composting can, however, be undertaken in the backyard, and some people do that, and on the farm, as well as the members of Aora who do it on an industrial scale, as you can see from that picture there. So it is a scalable process. So compost, what is it used for? Well, it's got wide application. In fact, we'd want to see more of it used in agriculture, horticulture, viticulture, local governments, if they're parks and gardens and sporting fields, in our home gardens, road construction, when they're building new roads and putting verges on the sides of roads and growing trees and shrubs and other plants can use compost and mulch. And of course, for mining rehabilitation as well, as we need to rehabilitate mines, compost or organic matter is a great way to help rehabilitate mines into a much better outcome than just a hole in the ground. We've touched on this already, thanks, Anne-Marie, but what are the benefits of compost? Increasing your organic matter, the microbial activity of your soil, nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus increases, micronutrients increase, carbon exchange and carbon sequestration increases, water holding capacity increases, and that's always important in this country when we're never too far away, unfortunately, from a drought. and it helps reduce soil erosion, compaction, and soil-borne diseases. So there are really a lot of ticks, a lot of benefits to this very natural product called compost. And the other thing I don't think we can ignore, and we shouldn't ignore, is that it is a renewable resource. So through agriculture, through communities, through our own households, we're continuing to have food waste, we have garden waste. We shouldn't be putting that into landfill. We should be making use of that and turning it into compost. Just some pictures. Pictures often paint 1,000 words. This is what we, as the Australian organics recycling industry, are hoping to produce. And if I look at these windrows of compost, I look at those and go, wow, that looks like really terrific fertile soil. And that's almost what it is, but certainly adding that material to your production system will increase, hopefully, your productivity and your profitability. A few more slides of what we're hoping to do. Again, look at that. I look at that material and think, yes, that's the sort of material we are aiming to produce out of this industry. And then what are we hoping to do with that material? We're hoping to do that. Produce food. Produce crops. It's a pretty good looking canola crop. And as I said, parks, gardens, and sporting fields all are absolutely beneficial markets for compost. So why use it? Supply of compost will certainly grow as governments work towards organic recycling targets, and we have national targets in this country now for recycling of organics. It's natural, it's organic matter. We make it here in Australia. We're not importing it. We're making it, and we're making it close to where the feedstock sources are. So right around the country, and in particular around metropolitan areas, there are significant processors now producing very high quality, large quantities of organic products such as compost. It is a product derived from a diversion from landfill that reduces greenhouse gas emissions. We don't want food waste. We don't want garden waste, as I said, going into landfill because that just decomposes there and produces methane, and that's no good for anybody. And particularly, it is of no value when we're trying to fight climate change. And as I've already mentioned, soil quality, soil salinity, soil compaction, water retention, carbon capture, and drought mitigation are all potential outcomes from using compost. And when I'm talking to farmers or people involved in agriculture, compost can increase the productivity of your soil, and from that we would also hope that you can increase your profitability. And one of the things we know today is that soil health, well-being of our soils is something getting increasing scrutiny and increasing interest. And we know that compost is an additive that you can put in the soil, which will improve soil health. That alone, I think, is just a very compelling reason to really consider the value of using compost. You want to know more, I'd refer you to the AORA website, which is aora.org.au. And if you click on the resources menu item from that website, you will find 8 compost fact sheets, which will across a variety of subjects, which I would recommend and commend to you. There's even a Find a Composter search facility on our website. So depending on where you are in the country, you can log on to Find a Composter and find a composter close to your facility or where you live. I'd also highly recommend that you visit and speak with a composter directly. Most of our members are very happy to have conversations and show their facilities and show what the composting process looks like on an industrial scale. And I would also highly recommend talking to a farmer who currently uses compost. And I know we're going to be talking to Mark today, and there's nothing better than talking to someone who is a user, a long-term user, and hear how they consider what they consider are the benefits. So there's nothing like real-world examples to actually tell this message better than what I can. That must just about be the end of my slides. Right. And look at that.
Great, thanks, John. And talk to a farmer directly. And we've got Mark here, who's sitting in his tractor, which I think is pretty impressive. Also, I want to mention that as John highlighted, we can get compost from from either our own farms, generating the material and composting on farm, or else bringing in a commercial composted product. And I think Mark has a long history of doing both of those things, so he'll be talking a bit to us about that. So I'd like to introduce Mark from Peter Schruers and Sons, and hopefully your sound is working okay there, Mark. So thanks very much.
You can hear me?
Yep, great.
Beautiful. Okay, thanks, Anne-Marie. Yep, I'm Mark Schruers from Peter Schruers and Sons, so I'm operations manager here. Not to be confused with Schruers and Sons, which are down at Tarwin. We're up at Devon Meadows, so we're sort of at the top end of Western Port Bay, sort of southeast of Melbourne by about 60, 70 kilometres. So our main crops that we grow are leeks. Leeks are our main crop. We do radicchio, kohlrabi, sugarloaf cabbage, baby cod, and wombox through the summer. All the other crops we do are 12 months of the year. So we're in a pretty good position to be able to do that. I'm going to stick with talking mainly about compost, but part of our the way we run our farm is our mission statement. Part of it is that while we're stewards of the land that we're on, our aim is to not only sustain what we've got, but to improve it. So we want to leave the farm in much better condition than when we first found it. And we moved here in '89. It was a cattle farm, and so we've been farming it with vegetables ever since. So we basically follow regenerative principles, and we've sort of come to that probably over the last 15 years. That's been our real focus for managing the farm. So for those who are not familiar with regenerative principles, it's sort of like followed 5 basic principles, which is kind of like keeping living roots in the soil for as long as possible, because life begets life, and empty soil is death really. So we want to harness as much photosynthetic energy as we can, so that can only be done best done with plants. So we work with that, and we also need the second principle sort of is to have as much biodiversity as we can. So with those plants, we want as many different types of plants as we can. So our crop choices are different families of plants, so it helps with the rotation. And then in between all that, we have multi-species cover crops, which are different species again, and we try to mix that up as much as we possibly can. So the next one is as minimal disturbance of the soil as possible. Now, we're in intensive horticulture, so we unfortunately do disturb the soil even just through the process of harvesting at times. We have to set that back, though, but we want to do as little disturbance as we can mechanically and chemically too. So it comes down to a lot of chemicals. I think people are unaware of the destruction that goes under the ground when you're using certain things, especially fungicides. So we keep that down to the barest minimum. And it's also keeping the soil covered as much of the time of the year as it can. We do have fallow soil at times. We hate it, but it's a necessary evil, but we keep that down to as very short a period as we can. If we have more than 4 weeks a year that ground's uncovered, that's a problem. So we work away from that. And what we'd really like to do, which we can't do, is just to integrate animals into the system. It's for various reasons. We're not really set up for that, but that's where compost and manures come in. So that's where we use instead to make up for that. So we'll stick with the compost story and our compost story. We, for a long time, were being told about the benefits of compost, so we looked at trialling compost. When we were looking at trialling, we often thought about it as a fertiliser. We were kind of a bit more conventional and not so regenerative, a bit more conventional. So we'd try compost, do exactly what we were told, and we look at the results in the next crop, really didn't see anything. We thought, just a lot of waste of money and effort, so we didn't take it too seriously. But through a series of aha moments, we've turned that around. And one of them was we used to grow parsnips, and being close to the coast and on a sandy sort of loam soil, we used to get this woody emulsion that was produced locally. It was marketed as compost, but I wouldn't quite call it compost. But it was a woody mulch, so we used to spread that over our soil, sow our parsnips into it, and that would hold the sand down together while the parsnips were germinating, so they wouldn't get cut off with sand in the wind. And anyway, long story short, this woody mulch is poor grade material. The place that was producing it, they didn't have enough room. They desperately had to get rid of it anyway. Through a series of, we ended up with, for no cost of our own, probably 2,000 or 3,000 tonnes of this stuff on the property. It was just an insane amount of material. Didn't know what to do with it. sat there for about 6 months. So after about 6 months, we thought we better get rid of it in the field. So because our paddock, we're 420 acres here, but we're split up into 30 smaller paddocks, and they're of varying different soil types. And some of our most difficult soil, when I say most difficult soil, it's sort of ground that was either slimy in the wet or it turned into little rocks in the dry. So it was just difficult. So when we were getting it ready for planting, we were just making bigger rocks into little rocks so we could stand up a plant. So we spread this material out onto these paddocks. And anyway, fast forward, we used to be very conventional in our tillage then, so we had tractor drivers working for us constantly. And at lunchtime conversation one time, about 18 months later, we talked about how certain paddocks were performing really well. So I went back over the records because we get pretty good records, and everywhere that started to perform really well was where we put this woody mulch. And that was kind of like, hey, there's something going on here. So we started then pursuing compost with a bit more vigour. So in about 2008, we started using compost regularly, trying to find out, what suited us best. So there's a lot of compost in that, and you have to find out exactly what you're after. And we were after a fairly clean product that was very humic, and higher fungal load was sort of our focus. And about 2014, we really took it on in earnest. We've sort of come across a product that we have been using, which is a premium revive. We get through Gibson's ground spread. It's been very good. So we went headstrong into composting along with everything else we were doing along the way. We were putting down at 20 tonne to the hectare, which we were warned by our compost gurus that can be a problem because if we're putting out too heavy, it can cause phosphorus and other build-ups. But we also do very comprehensive soil tests every 24 months, and so we've monitored that all the way through, and basically we've not had a problem since. So in 21, we've backed that down to 12 tonne to the hectare, and that's pretty much as a maintenance there because we're still tilling. We want to replace any oxidised carbon with the compost that we put on. So our aim is to cycle as much carbon through the soil as we can. We started measuring our soil organic carbon in 2008, and at the time we thought it was low, but apparently for the industry it wasn't too bad. So it was about 0.5 to 1%, and we've over time now built that up to about 4%. We're aiming to be cycling 5% of carbon in the soil, and just to talk to some of the benefits that come from it, like it's compost being one part of many things that we're doing, but our systems become so much more resilient since following the regenerative principles. For starters, we use very little artificial fertiliser, and it's a story I always like to tell too, about things that are going on currently and what happened a few years ago in Ukraine. Stuff that's got nothing to do with us. Nitrogen goes 4 times the price. Everybody's upset. Didn't bother us because we don't buy any nitrogen in. We don't have to, and we use very little artificial fertiliser at all. We also we use very little fungicide. It's only an emergency thing. It's usually copper-based or sulphur-based. Something as soft as we can. We on our property, because leeks are our #1 crop, where we do the most of. The whole property has a crop of leeks every 12 months for every rotation, which is putting pressure on it. We don't spray fungicide nor insecticide on those crops of leeks. We can do it without it. We've figured it out the way. And it's just we've got a much more resilient system now. And it's basically with the less use of insecticides and stuff, basically the soil performs. It's very hard to quantify what good soil is, but it's just damn well easy to manage. So it's drains so much easier. We used to have a lot more drainage problems, but we thought we were doing a lot of physical upgrading the drainage work, but really by getting your soil in good condition and that organic activity really humming, the drainage takes care of itself. Our water retention, the last 2 summers now have tested the system a bit because we've had fairly warm, dry summers, and our water usage is down from about 3/4 to 2/3 of what we projected and what we would have done probably 20 years ago. So we're retaining more water. So it's just basically by every measure, it's a big benefit. So so we're going to continue keeping it part of our program. But that's one thing with compost, you've got to think it's a long-term, it's like a slow burn. It's something that works slowly into your system. So I don't know what could crap on about a lot of things if you want, but anyway. You there?
Yeah, Mark, I might chime in here too. You've done a great job of sharing some photos with us. Do you want to talk through some of the photos you've shared through?
Oh, okay.
What's happening on your property?
Yep.
I'll click through the slides.
All right. Yeah, okay. So the first slide there, that's just a rolled cover crop. So that's part of keeping the ground covered all the time. So that's a multi-species cover crop we've grown. We obviously don't need that soil for a cash crop just yet. So what we often do is we crimp roll it and let it sit there. And what usually happens with the crimp rolling is we have so many species in there. The 4 or 5 dominant species have grown up first. We crimp roll them down. That terminates them. Usually the other species that are sitting there get a chance to get the sunlight and they take off. So we get like a second cover crop without having to sow anything down there. The different species that come out there, and we just keep the growth going for as long as we can. And if it's hot and dry, we just let that die off on the soil. It becomes a brown cover. So that works for us, and that way we're protecting our soil the whole time. So if you get a rain event or a wind event, what sort of weather event, it's the ground just stays put. It doesn't go anywhere. So it saves erosion, keeps the ground a lot cooler, a lot more stable, and still it's bioactive too. So there's a lot of fungus and bacteria and stuff still operating in there.
Yeah, excellent. Mark, I'm just going to move to the next slide, but perhaps some of the audio is coming through just a little broken, and perhaps some folk might be having some trouble. But yeah, maybe just slow it down a bit, and we can, because taking all these awesome pics from your place.
No worries. It's just a demonstration of, like, because leeks being our main crop, we harvest them with a shear harvester. So that's like ploughing the soil. So that's where, minimal soil disturbance. Sometimes it's minimal, but it's not non-existent because you physically have to pull the plants out of the ground. Then we have to go and reset those beds again. So it's just a demonstration of that. So, yep. And the next one, so that's some of the compost. That's the sort of compost we're currently using. So it's that particular compost in picture is screened down to only 7 mil. And what we find with that is we're getting a lot of the very fine, heavy humic matter. It also screens out a lot of the rubbish because it's a commercial product. That's one of the big challenges is bits of plastic and other contaminants that can get through. But we found by that fine screening, that tends to then give us a nice clean product at the end, something that we're more than happy with. But if you get the larger, less screened stuff, you're going to get more contaminants, which can be a problem. So, and that's just, loading into the spreader. So it's a little spreader that we made specifically for the compost. So it's just a belt spreader. Good humic compost is not fun to handle because it's quite heavy, gets a bit of moisture and it gets quite sticky. But our rule of thumb is the harder it is to handle, the better it is for the ground. That's kind of how it works. So we ended up dedicating a little machine especially for it, made up for it. So, yeah. You can go to the next slide. And that shows you how we apply our compost. It's usually done when we're at the time of terminating cover crop and getting ready for planting. So usually a cover crop like that that's going to sit long term, we often put a bit of foul manure underneath it. It's aged foul manure. Grow the cover crop on there. We'll keep that alive for as long as we can. And then just a few weeks prior to planting, we'll terminate that. In this case, we're mulching this one down, and then we spread our compost over the top of that, and then incorporate that into the soil. So that's how we add it. Yeah, and that's just some of the things we're doing by keeping permanent mulches. We're playing around with strip tilling our leeks into the ground, so it's once again minimal disturbance. We're rather than working the entire profile of the soil, we're just working it's just a small area where the plants are going to grow. So we've just been playing around with that for the last 12 months. So
That's great. Mark, I think that's end of the slideshow there. There's some fantastic photos you've got there about what's happening within your production system. I'm sure there's going to be a couple of questions coming through. So I might jump through to a bit of a discussion for anyone who might have some questions in relation to what you're up to. I'll certainly just acknowledge too, we had a late apology with Nathan Free. So you might see some of his name mentioned earlier. Nathan has a very interesting system up in Northern Victoria in some different country, but was just a very late apology. But Mark, that's a really great outline. You've touched on a couple of points I'm keen to explore a little bit further, but I do know John's asked in the chat, and it is a very relevant question. You have touched on this, but keen for you to think about how you treat compost, recognizing that's not a fertilizer per se, but where it might sit in a complementarity to your fertilizer regime, and whether you've been able to reduce any of your other inputs as a result of having compost within your production system.
Yeah, well, we don't consider compost a fertilizer. We consider it's more of a soil conditioner. So being very, the compost we're using, it's a high fungal and very, it's a high fungal load. So it's basically adding the organic carbon and the activity to the soil. It's part of keeping those life cycles going. Because the way we approach fertilizer, and it's part of another aha moment for our farming system, is we noticed that we started farming in the 80s, learned agronomy in the 80s, and it was pretty much, you've got this problem, you add this or this fertilizer, these symptoms are showing up, you've got this group of chemicals, and you add this fertilizer, then that puts something else out of balance, so you've got to add a bit of that. It's like farming a chemistry set. There's one time I like being out in the forest and stuff like that, and it's just like, as John said earlier about being in the forest, and we noticed on the forest floor, you sort of think, man, everything's in balance out here, and nobody's adding anything to this, and it sort of hits you that it's all the chemistry we're learning is very important, but it's only a byproduct of biology. So we concentrate on having that biology going in there, and compost goes a long way towards that, because compost is, as it's been explained to me once, it's like that organic carbon is like the home for all that, the microbes and everything that live in the soil, and I thought that was a good analogy. So you want to build as much of a home as you can. So that's basically how you got to look at compost. It's like a facilitator for other processes to take place. So that's how we look at it. And since we've been on our compost program as part of it, in conjunction with other things, our fertilizer usage has gone down to probably, only less than a quarter of what it used to be, and it used to be very low anyway. So the amount of fertilizer we use is like as an input cost for us is almost negligible. We don't really rate it as something we concentrate on. So we mainly want to get rid of artificial, well, not get rid of it. We want to use it as minimum as we can, because people don't realise that stuff is toxic to the soil. If you have a look around a granular of compound fertilizer, that creates a dead zone there. It kills everything around it. I mean, you get a plant response, but the microbes do not like it.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Mark. And I just hope I got that right. A 75% reduction on your input systems, quite a significant thing over time, but certainly recognise that soil additive rather than a replacement.
Yes.
John, did you want to elaborate on anything more from the industry perspective with AORA in regards to where that debate or discussion sits, and perhaps some confusion that might exist from time to time?
No, look, I think Mark's covered off really, really well, and I think his analogies are spot on. And I think when we talk about the application of compost in agriculture broadly, or horticulture, it is not a substitute for fertilizer. If someone's going to buy compost and not buy fertilizer and think that compost is going to give them the same production boost that they were getting from fertilizer, they're probably going to be disappointed. But the thing about compost is, as Mark really, I love his analogy, is that home. It is building the capacity, the health of the soil, the improvement of that home basis. That concept is really important today more than ever. That if we can get the health of our soil right, and we need to do that, and compost is a great way of doing that. If you can get that quality right of your soil, then you can reduce your inputs of synthetic fertilizers, and you can improve the productivity of that soil. And I think that's a really clear and important message. So well done, Mark.
That's great.
Can I just add something, Clinton? I think Mark's really clear about what he does and doesn't want from his compost, and having that conversation with the compost to say, I'm after a really good, high quality humic product. Whereas often composters might think that agriculture can take a lesser quality product, but it's really important that we're clear that for vegetable production, it needs to be a quality quality product, and that we need to let the composters know exactly what's expected from that.
That's great, Emery. It's a lovely segue to another question that's coming through around what that conversation should look like to your composter. So we have very briefly touched on that there are Australian standards 4454 in relation to compost. But yeah, Mark, just from your perspective to start with, and keen for John and Marie's thoughts here too, but what's the most important conversations or aspects that you're looking for in that discussion with your compost provider?
I think if you're going to go down the compost, whatever you're doing, if it comes to cover crops or anything like that, you've got to know where you're going, what you want to achieve. So you've got to have some sort of goal in mind. If you just say, hey, I'm going to use compost, and you have no idea what you expect out of it, or just see what happens, that's fine. But if you've got a direction to go in, that's important. So for us, we were looking at in the early days, we were sort of not sure, but we started to realise that we needed to focus on getting our organic carbon up into the soil. So that's where we focus. So we were looking for a nice humic, heavy carbon loaded sort of compost, something that was going to do the job. Now, just about all compost are pretty high in carbon, but there's varying degrees, and then you've got to work out what's going to be economically viable. So the compost we're using is relatively expensive. You can get a lot of cheap products out there, but it's giving us for value, it's high value for us for our carbon. So it's what you've got to sort of work towards. And we've always wanted to get rid of synthetics. That's not get rid of, not be reliant on synthetics, I should say. Because I'm not anti-synthetics. I don't want to come across like that, because I think they have their place, but we shouldn't be farming to rely on them. So things like compost is probably better to keep that in your program than a constant fungicide program. You're going to get a lot more benefit out of your compost long term, I think, than that. That's only my opinion, but that's the direction we're going in. So we've always had a focus that we're moving away from synthetics as much as we can. So we want to go to more organic type of solutions, and that's so I'd say the first thing you want to do is figure out exactly what you want on your farm, and then you talk to your composters about what your goals are, and then you sort of work together, and you can come up with something. And we've found too, a lot of composters, they'll screen stuff especially for you if you want. They've done that for us in the past too, so they can be quite helpful.
Can I ask another question on that, please? Mark, how important is doing the soil testing before you start using something like compost to get an idea of the profile and the problem you might be trying to solve? Is that important to you?
That'd be up to the individual. For us, ever since we first moved here, we've been doing our biannual comprehensive soil test, and that's really because we started at a fairly low base and we had to build it up. And I'd say last 20 years now, every time we get a soil test back, the agronomists that do it, keep doing what you're doing, there's nothing to see here type of thing. So that's what it is for us. So if you're looking for specific things, I would still say that putting something like compost in there is good, because it's like I don't know how to describe it. It's like a stabilising agent, or it's a shock absorber for your farm. So you'll lose less nutrients. It makes things. It's certainly a less volatile sort of product. So a lot of the chemical nutrients we put on are extremely volatile. So they gas off, they leach away, they do whatever. Whereas the organic type of inputs, they tend to stay around. They don't fluctuate as much. And then if you can manage your soil in such a way you're getting your microbial activity right up and happening, that's when the system becomes more stable, in our experience anyway. That's when you get something that it can handle bad weather events or whatever it comes through to. It becomes a resilient system. So those soil tests, that's up to the individual. If you're chasing anything specific, I think compost will help you, but it's probably not your solution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that, Mark. Emery, did you have something else you wanted to add in there?
No, that's fine.
All good, all good. Excellent. I'm curious, we just circling back to the quality aspect of it too, something that has come on, and Mark, you touched on this very briefly, and I don't want to dwell on it, but I think it's important around some of the quality inconsistency or risks of contamination that might happen in the market. Very curious for all your observations over time as a long-term user. Any changes you've seen in product over time, and how you might deal with that, particularly in conversations with your composter. But also keen, John, for how industry is managing that.
Yeah,
Mark,
look, sorry.
Start with yourself. Sorry, Mark.
Okay, that's all right. Now, with and this is probably more John's problem because I've been visited a lot of composting facilities overseas and locally, and contamination's a real problem, especially if it comes from if they're getting green waste in there. Because and I don't know how to fix it. It's like an education thing because people, they throw away their pot plant with the pot, and they put that green waste, or they package up in a plastic bag all their kitchen scraps and chuck the whole bag in the waste, and that's what the composters have to deal with. But of course, that's not what we want on our farm because we can't accept product like that over a long term because then our farms become a rubbish tip, and that contamination, that's an obvious food safety risk that we want to avoid. So I know early on some of the low grade stuff we're getting was just too contaminated, especially glass. Can't handle glass at all. Don't want that. So it becomes, if you're getting from a commercial, that becomes a big part of the conversation. If you get specific made stuff and there are people making stuff a bit more specific where their inputs are probably less likely to get the contaminants, they can be very good too. But it's just varying degrees. And I know we've played around in the past with making it ourselves. It's quite an art. It's definitely a cross between a science and an art. And if you could make it yourself, well, we just don't have the facilities and the room to do it here. But if you can take control, something you can take control of, you'd like to. But I think working with most people are pretty good to work with, I think. So you can come out with it. But that contamination can be a problem.
And from an industry perspective, Clinton, contamination, is probably from an organics recycling industry perspective is our biggest issue. It is one that we, have to continually focus on, particularly as feedstock streams change. The introduction of FOGO services through, metropolitan and city and town areas, so that increases the potential for contamination. What I would say though is, as an industry, we are very focused on that. There is technology being introduced at organic processes to, reduce. You'll never eliminate, but certainly reduce and significantly reduce that. The education campaigns that we talk about through local councils and more broadly about, don't put this in your bin, being able to make sure the good source separation. So that's also happening. But I think one of the things that Mark touched on, which is really important, is that, as a farmer, and if you're thinking about using compost, and there are plenty of compelling reasons, which we've heard from Mark, you could and you should consider that. Have a conversation with your composter. Tell them this is the quality. You need a quality product. That product that Mark showed us being screened down to 7 mil. I mean that to me, looking at those photos, looked like a brilliant product. Mark has got very clear specifications and requirements because of what he is producing. Have that conversation with your composter because I'm sure that they are able to meet those requirements if you clearly spell them out to them. They want you to be a repeat customer. They want customers like Mark who's going to buy that product every year because they know it's a quality product and it will help them produce a quality crop. So there's a symbiotic relationship there. I think we will continue to focus as an industry on the contamination challenge, but, we are making some headway on that through the various initiatives we have.
That's great. Thanks for that, Mark and John. I'd still invite anyone, if there's any final questions just before we wrap up, feel free to add them into the chat. Just touching on that too, John, I'm just wondering going forward too, like what's some of the biggest barriers or challenges to supporting increased adoption and use of compost from an industry perspective?
That's a really good question, and one that we think about often. And, of course, we want more farmers like Mark to be considering to use compost. And the reasons for doing that, as Mark has alluded to and as I have, are really quite compelling. I think there's a lot of uncertainty about, what is compost? How do I use compost? What is it going to do to my production system? I think they're all things that we as an industry have to address. And strategically, we're thinking about that more. We have to find more examples of the Marks of the world and talk about that and demonstrably put the benefits on the table to people to say, you know, this is an option for you. These are the benefits of doing it. So I think there's that education piece, which we're going to advocacy and education piece that we're going to need to continue to pursue if we want broader uptake of compost. So yeah, look, I think that's probably enough on that. Yes, it is something that is very much top of mind for us, and we think that anything that can improve soil health through compost. And as I say, I come from a farming background, so I'm interested in that productivity, which equates to that profitability. Mark is not going to use compost, or no farmer is going to use compost unless there's going to be a demonstrable benefit at the end of the day. They're not doing it for altruistic reasons. They're doing it to actually get a result. So we have to make sure we can communicate that in a compelling way and give great examples, for example, like what Mark is doing.
That's great. Thanks, John. Emery, is there anything from your perspective to add into that?
Well, I think, Clinton, just to highlight what John said, profitability, efficient use of resources. We've touched on the potential to manage green material and also that product loss side of things. And I think the work that Mark's doing is just highlighting how, it is a circular solution, and it's great if we can keep the organic material, build the carbon in the soil, and make sure that we're using the resource efficiently. And that 75% reduction in fertilizer use costs is really an indicator of what it's building in the soil. So it really highlights what can be done.
Excellent. Thanks, Emery. Mark, I'm going to ask you that a little bit differently, but I'd just be keen for your, final advice that you'd have for other growers who might be considering compost use. Based on your experience, what would you pass on to them as a key message?
Advice, like I always say, with anything along this side, just have a go. Just figure out what you want out of your farm and how you want your farm to perform, and have a go. Start trialing, but remember, with the trials, it's a long-term thing. I would always look at results over 2 years. Don't look at instant results. And but like I always say, people are very quick to trial synthetic things and all sorts of chemicals, and but they seem very hesitant to trial anything that's organic, and they're worried about messing things up. But I'm sort of thinking, my mind is that it's a lot easier to mess something up that's synthetic or chemical that's volatile, whereas the organic stuff is a little bit more. It's a little bit more forgiving, so you can't get it too wrong, unless you buy something that really shouldn't be used. But that's on you. So.
Yeah,
it's it's relatively low risk, isn't it, Mark?
It is. The risks are very low. I mean, you don't ignore them, but they're sort of like, it's not something you get hung up on. So I know a lot of people worry about the microbial side of things, but I'm sort of thinking the risk is extremely low. It's well overblown. I think it's I don't tend to stress too much over that. And we actually through our QA, because we're SQF certified, and through HARPS and everything, we do double the testing that's required, because I'm big on testing on here. And look, there's no problems that we don't come up. We test all the material itself, but we never come up with an issue. So if it's treated right, there's the risk is low.
Yeah. Fantastic. Look, thank you, everyone. I think that's probably a good note where to end our discussion today. I'm going to give a bit of a plug for the Soil Wealth ICP project. They've just shared a screen with a couple of fantastic resources available through the project. And certainly noting that this is Soil Wealth ICP, but also some great AORA resources that John touched on as well, in addition to some of the standards within the industry. So we'll share this around later with the notes to go out with this webinar, but certainly calling out there's some great content available at hand. I certainly just want to thank everyone for joining the discussion today. Big shout out to Mark joining from the field. That's fantastic. Of course, Anne-Marie and John as well. Always great to have that input coming through. What I just have on your screen right now, and I'm going to try and put into the chat as well, always helpful for us to make sure that we're getting good feedback on how the project is going, and anything you'd like to see done differently about the way the information is presented or shared through the project. So there is a QR code there to a Microsoft Forms, if you could just fill out a quick M&E. I've also put it into the chat as well. A very long form, just had to appear because the hyperlink didn't copy across. But certainly we'll make sure that's included when the final details of the recording are distributed as well. But certainly encourage you to grab that QR code to provide that feedback. Really important, recognising this is a levy-funded project, and that we continue to take that on board. So unless there was anything else, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today for an awesome discussion on compost.
Thanks, Clinton.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Mark. Thanks, Anne-Marie.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you.